Blessing for the longest night. All throughout these months, as the shadows have lengthened, this blessing has been gathering itself, making ready, preparing for this night. It has practiced walking in the dark, traveling with its eyes closed, feeling its way by memory, by touch, by the pull of the moon, even as it wanes. So believe me when I tell you this blessing will reach you even if you have not light enough to read it, it will find you even though you cannot see it coming. You will know the moment of its arriving by your release of the breath you have held so long, a loosening of the clenching of your hands, of the clutch around your heart, a thinning of the darkness that had drawn itself around you. This blessing does not mean to take away the night, but it knows its hidden roads, knowing the resting spots along the path, knows what it means to travel in the company of a friend. So when this blessing comes, take its hand, get up, set out on the road you cannot see. This is the night when you can trust that any direction you go, you'll be walking toward the dawn.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
Nice. I like that.
Solstice story. Once upon a time, on a frosty December night, a group of little fairies huddled in their home deep under the roots of a giant oak tree. They were safe and warm. Outside, the wind blew cold and snow covered the ground. I saw the Sun King today, the fairy named Rose said. He looked so old and tired as he walked off through the forest. The great oak said, he's dying, answered her sister Daffodil. Dying? Well, what will we do now? Little Zinnia started to cry. The Sun King dies, our plant friends will not grow. The birds will not come and sing again. Everything will be winter forever. Rose and Daffodil tried to comfort their sister, but they were all very sad. As they huddled together, there was a knock on the tiny door of the great oak tree. Hello, fairies, called out a loud voice. Why are you hiding instead of joining the forest in our solstice celebration? Rose opened the door and a little gnome pushed inside, shaking the glistening snowflakes off his coat and hat. We're too sad to celebrate, Daffodil said, wiping her eyes. The Sun King is dying, haven't you heard? The Sun King is dead, Brother Gnome said, his round, dark eyes sparkling with laughter. Now hurry, or we'll be late for our celebration. How can you be happy and laughing? Rose frowned at the gnome. If the Sun King is dead, it will be winter always. We will never see the sun again. Oh, little child fairies. The gnome reached for Rose's hand and pulled her to her feet. There's a secret to the winter solstice. The three fairies looked at him in surprise. Secret, they all said. What secret? Come and see, come and see. Brother Gnome danced and jigged around the room. Hurry, hurry, don't be slow. To the ancient oak grove together we shall go. He danced out the door and disappeared. What did Brother Gnome mean? Rose asked as she gathered up her cloak. I don't know. Perhaps if we go, we will see what Brother Gnome was talking about, answered Zinnia as she pulled on her hat. Fairies left their warm home and trudged off through the snow toward the ancient oak grove. It was a dark and freezing cold night. They flew through icy wind until they came across their friend the fox. Where are you going, fairies? Fox asked. To the ancient grove, they answered, shivering. Climb on my back, warm yourselves in my fur. I will take you there swiftly. The fox knelt down so the fairies could climb up. Then he raced off through the dark. Listen, Zinnia said as they neared the grove of ancient trees. Someone is singing happy songs, a lot of someones. The beautiful music carried over the cold, still moonlit air. It was the most beautiful music the sisters had ever heard. Fox carried the little fairies right through a spiral of trees, right to the center of the grove, then knelt down. Why, the whole of the forest must be here, said the little fairies, as they slid to the snow-covered ground. They're all smiling and happy, said Rose as she looked around at the woodland creatures. The little fairies moved closer until their eyes laid on what was in the very center of the grove. A baby, the fairies cried. A new little baby. Look how he glows. He is the newborn Sun King, said the fox, smiling. But Brother Gnome said the Sun King was dead, the fairies answered. How can this little baby be the Sun King? That is the great secret of the winter solstice. Every year the Sun King must come to the ancient grove during the darkest days of winter, where he dies and receives new life again. The fairies laughed. They were so happy. The winter would come to an end after all. The fairies sang to the baby Sun King, songs of the coming spring, the sweet-smelling flowers, the bumbling bees, and all the secrets of the forest during the long summer. And all the creatures within the grove sang with them. Then Fox took them back to their snug home under the roots of the giant oak tree, where they dreamed wonderful dreams, waiting for the warmth of spring and the fun they would have with the new little Sun King.
Oh,
Nice.
you. That's precious.
Yeah. Thank
That's
you,
good.
Carrie.
You're welcome. It's hilarious because I'm the person who gets to winter solstice every year and goes, "Oh no, summer's coming back."
Well, this gives you a new perspective. You just reframe that a little bit.
Oh dear. No, I get to summer solstice. Woo, it's going to get cold.
Yeah. Maybe you could go to the Southern Hemisphere for 6 months of the year.
I would so be happy with that.
Yeah. This is about high holidays and what we do for ceremony, and which belief systems have different ceremonies for these holidays that are coming up, and then others that may not. The one I used in the example in the newsletter was an Ecuadorian shamanism tribe. And they do this ceremonial thing traditionally, which is the flower circle with fruit surrounding the fire, the sacred fire in the center. And these are done in ancient traditions. But when I was doing the research for it, I found this link to the Christian version, or the Catholic version is what they called it. So the colonization has come in and taken some of these traditions and turned them into something else. And so what it was a big festival that had all kinds of costumes and music and all of this stuff. And it's like, okay, well, they also said in the article there are ancient traditions that are done during the festivals too, but it was way commercialized compared to what a traditional Native American ceremony would have been.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And you think about the colonization and how that changed everything, from spirituality to religious practice to people's belief systems. And you think about all the missionaries that came through and taught is it all Catholic? It's not all Catholic, is it? Christian faith of all sorts that have taken over some of these cultures. And then when you try to go back after legislation allowed people to go back and learn their own languages and their traditions again, then they try to revert that. But then you've got 2 generations of people who have been trained in the Christian style. And so it's kind of clunky to go backwards. But remembering our roots is, I think, in general, a pretty good thing, because we have to return to the laws of nature to get back to our sacred selves, to be with our energetic spirituality and connections to the world. So that's my rant.
When I read what the subject matter was going to be for today, it reminded me of a ritual that I have done for many years here at the house, and it's a winter solstice ceremony, and it has some sort of quasi Christian elements to it. But the origins of it go way back to like the Paleolithic period, where it's the longest night of the year, and then the rebirth of the sun, and and all of that.
Yeah.
So this particular one it's pretty pagan in its flavor, if you will. But it's Christians do it too, because the example I'll give you is that the pagans or the pre-Christians, they would extinguish all the fires in the village. Every hearth went dark, and all that. And then they would do a vigil, they would fast. The villagers would fast, and then they would, at like 1 stroke after midnight, or whenever the stars told them it was the right time at night, because they didn't have clocks back then, of course. Then they would light the bonfire in the center of the village, and every hearth would take a coal from that, or a burning brand from that, would light their own hearths.
Nice.
And then there would be a feast
Uh-huh.
and all of that. So, and then fast forward, I'm a kid, I'm in church on that night, and everybody, when you entered the church, you were given a candle, those little white, those little white utility candles,
Yeah.
with the little paper thing around it, so you didn't get burnt when it melted. And we would sing hymns and all kinds of, the kids choir would sing, and there would be all kinds of fun stuff like that. And everybody would bring a covered dish for later. And then at one point they'd turn out all the lights in the church, and only the light in front of the altar would be lit. And
Yeah.
then each person would come and would light their candle off of that until the sanctuary was full of light again. And then we would sing a hymn of Thanksgiving and all of that. And then everyone would adjourn to the fellowship hall, and we'd all have a feast. So,
Nice.
it was essentially kind of a pagan celebration within a Christian community.
Yeah.
And I always thought that was kind of a neat thing. It was one thing that they appropriated that made sense to me.
Uh-huh.
So I've continued that at my house, and I used to decorate the place up and do a thing, but then, I guess people lost interest in it because the last time I did it, nobody came except for Paula and Matthew.
Oh,
So Paula, Matthew, and John and I had a good time.
there you go. Just enough.
Yeah, that's one of the ancient pagan rituals that's still around. People are still doing it. And I think it's a lovely sentiment and a lovely ceremony to do.
Yeah.
So
And that's done when?
on the night of the winter solstice, which is the longest night of the year, and
Yeah.
the rebirth of the sun and all that, because from then on, the days start getting longer. Not perceptibly at first, but they do.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So the candle was meant to take you into a world of darkness, to provide light in the dark of the winter.
Yeah. It was to symbolize the rebirth of the sun,
Okay.
the rebirth of the light half of the year. Because in there's the dark half of the year and there's the light half of the year. And the winter solstice is what separates the dark from the light. And the summer solstice celebrates the light to the dark. Because after the summer solstice, the days start getting shorter. And then you get to the winter solstice and they start getting longer again. And that was in many pagan communities or groups, that marked the beginning of the new year. So, because it was the one thing they could count on, it was the one thing that they always knew.
Mhm.
This is going to be this is going to be this. Whereas a lot of the other things would sort of float around a little bit because of the phases of the moon and so forth and so on. But that's one thing that was a constant.
Yeah.
And so that started the new year. And
So I just looked it up, and winter solstice this year is December 21st.
and that's about when it is.
Yes. And there's a Christmas pickle up there. A big tradition of the Christmas pickle. Had anyone else heard of that?
Uh-uh.
No, I'll share. Like it on my holiday search last year, I came across this, and lo and behold, it was where my brother lives. There's a ceramic Christmas pickle that you hide on the tree, and you have to find the Christmas pickle and all this. And I asked my brother about it. He's like, "Yeah, we've got one."
Oh,
What?
I've
But it's
never heard of
right
this.
where he lives.
Oh.
I know, it's bizarre.
And you're right,
we'll
it's
be-
very
when we're
discreet
doing
back in the
Christmas-
tree.
Yeah, yeah,
Out in the
we're gonna get
Midwest
ourselves a
in-
Christmas pickle, even though we don't have a tree, but we're gonna have Christmas.
In Iowa, we used to, when I was a kid growing up, when we had Thanksgiving, we did turkey notes. We wrote turkey notes to everybody in our family, and we would make up little poems like turkey red, turkey blue, turkey says I love you. And you'd roll it up in a little ball, in a roll, and put brown crepe paper around it and twist the edges and put it on everybody's plate. And then we'd go around and everybody would read their thing. Of course, we did nasty ones to our sisters, mean ones to our sisters, but that was the turkey notes every Thanksgiving.
That's cool.
Now, what was the pickle supposed to signify?
There's all kinds of theories about it. It's I put a link in the chat. There's just all kinds. I'm gonna ask around when we're up there for Christmas and see what the prevailing theory is. And they have like a pickle festival in July, and there's a pickle
Oh my
5K, and I mean, The interesting thing is it's also like the capital of the Seventh-day Adventists, because that's where Andrews University is Berrien Springs again. So as my mom and my husband and I are vegetarians or pescatarians, we can get food like you wouldn't believe in this little tiny town because it's where the Seventh-day Adventists are. So it's just all these weird combinations in that little
Wow.
town. They just kind of picked at random. I love going up there. Very interesting.
So the Seventh-day Adventists are all vegetarians?
That was one of the lifelines to us when we lived in Atlanta, was the Seventh-day Adventist bookstores. You can also buy all kinds of great vegetarian meat substitutes and things like that. It's every city we're in, we look for the bookstore, and the people are usually extremely friendly and welcoming. And we ran on the campus of the university a couple of weeks ago. But it's such a lifeline to vegetarians, because while we're going to this big dinner, we can bring a dinner loaf, or we can bring whatever that you can't normally find. It's gotten much more widestream, but we're talking in 1992 when we quit eating meat, it was much, much, much harder.
Yeah.
So those bookstores were just a lifesaver to us, and a great community. Again, like you said, we moved away 10, 15 years ago, and the people in the bookstore in Atlanta still remember us every time we're there. So it's just a very different kind of thing. And it all comes from set in Berrien Springs, Michigan. Who knew?
Yeah. I pulled a line from the article you shared with us. As the story is told, on Christmas Eve, he begged a guard for a pickle while starving. The guard provided the pickle, which he later credited the guard for saving his life. Interesting.
There you go.
Yeah.
Pickle?
It's a great post-run snack too. Electrolytes.
Yes. Yes. We used to have pickle juice after ceremony in the Sundances.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
I used to drink pickle juice as a kid. I liked the juice better than the pickles.
Yeah.
My mother thought I was really
It could have been because you were dehydrated and your body just craved it.
Right.
probable.
What we're going to talk about is some of the interesting ways we draw people into our stories. And this applies whether you're writing fiction, nonfiction, memoir, essays, oral storytelling, lectures, ceremonies, sermons, all kinds of writing. You want to draw people in. That's one way you bring their interest. Is even if I'm going to tell you a story about my run yesterday, I'm going to describe what the setting was like. I'm going to describe the things I felt, the things I smelled, the temperature of the air, the taste of my water I was drinking, because I put electrolytes in it. All those things are going to put you where I am. And so you start to see that story through my eyes. And it is certainly vital in fiction, because the biggest selling genre for years and for years to come is romance. It's by far the biggest selling genre. And its setting is very important because, yes, of course, the story, I won't say predictable. A great example is if you've ever seen Star Trek, Spock's dialogue often did not have contractions, but there was a very good reason for that. That was a great illumination of his character. Whereas, Kirk, and especially McCoy being from the South, he's going to use the contractions and their dialogue. It's actually a great thing to study, is that original Star Trek show. If you watch those three different characters and the way they speak and the way they relate to the world and the things that are important to them, wonderfully well-written dialogue. Another thing people do in real world is we don't use complete sentences. And another thing that will lead into setting here is people do things while they talk.
The only thing I would add is it kind of puts everything in a context. A story is a story without the context, and I'm not going to understand the meaning of the story without knowing the context. I think I was fairly lucky. I was raised in a school that did all these experimental courses. And one of the courses I took was music appreciation. And it was for the entire year by the English department. And it was you listening to music and literally analyzing it. And then you had to present that before the class. And it really taught me to listen, as into what the messages of the songs are. And in most cases, it's nobody without you kind of thing. And that's the worst message to get across. But when you say you said a lot, what occurred to me is you being a nurse would have to report, well, this patient said this family member said this. So said would be a really natural word for you to use, going back to your comment about, talking the way we talk. And, when you talk about different ways to look at things, I think of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John in the New Testament. And they're basically the same story, but from entirely different viewpoints, according to the author. And like one author would tell you a detail the other one didn't think important or whatever, and it's all context that we are able to put in. And the hardest thing is to express an emotion, in writing. And that kind of it's almost the test of our mettle sometimes. But, you've opened my eyes in a lot of different ways to look at things, and maybe I'll pay attention a bit more.
I was talking to Adriana. Hello there.
Hi, I'm good. Nice to meet you.
Nice to see you too. Anything particular you want to talk about?
No, I'm just excited to be here and being with you like-minded people and hearing what you have to say.
Good.
Your topic seems really interesting. My daughter's 2 and she's really into storytelling right now. So I've been trying to remember just different fairy tales or stories that, I'm trying to remember. I was trying to tell her the tortoise and the hare last night.
Interesting.
Remember.
How long do you think stories have been around? How long do you think fairy tales have been around?
They've been around for, ever.
Yeah.
I feel like they've been around for forever. Everyone's always told folk tales, fairy tales, whatever they are. There's always some sort of tale that we tell, right? To entertain our children or to teach them a lesson or.
Always.
Mm-hmm.
Sally, I said hello to you, right? No, I didn't. Hey, Sally.
Yeah. What?
Tell me about your take on fairy tales. What do you think about fairy tales?
Oh, I think they're wonderful. A wonderful vehicle for children's imagination. Fairy tales also, depending on what they are, they also give children a sense of empowerment in a world for which they have no control when they're little. They can be very colorful. They can be very dark.
They can
and
be
I think
very
they're all
dark.
valid. Yeah, and I think they're all very valid. They
Yeah.
were a tremendous part of my childhood. There's a couple that stand out for me. One was Alice in Wonderland, was I think my all-time favorite. And then I have a book that I've had since I was 4 years old. I'll dig it out and show it to everybody later.
Right.
It's called The Road in Storyland. And it was edited by a man named Watty Piper. And the illustrations in the book are just beautiful. And it was my constant companion when I was a little kid. And then when I had my son, we read from it almost every night. And my husband and I just purchased another copy of it because mine's falling apart. And I hope to be able to give that to my son to pass on to his kids when he has them.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Well, you're right. Storytelling goes way, way back. Sure. Well, let's go back to the beginning of fairy tales. What I'd like you to do, and a couple of you are already kind of ahead of me on this, is to think about the fairy tale when you were young, whatever age you want to pick. I'd like you to remember the name or the story of your all-time favorite fairy tale. If you have something to write down, would you write down the name of that fairy tale, please? And it doesn't matter whether the name is correct or not. And as best you can recall, what was the byline of that story? What was the story about? If there was a so-called moral of that story, what were they trying to tell children in the story? And do you remember the book in which you heard the story? Is it one you read yourself or one that somebody read to you? If who read the story to you? Now, it might be more than one person, but who can you remember actually reading you a story, a fairy tale? Now, how do most fairy tales begin? They always begin the same way.
Once upon a time.
There you go. Good girl, Paula. Once upon a time. So it could be any time, correct? It could be anywhere, anytime. Okay, I like to go through real quickly and have each of us talk about what was our favorite fairy tale. So, Laura, let's start with you. As you can best recall, what was the name of your favorite fairy tale?
I think Snow White.
Ah, good. What you like about Snow White?
Oh, that she had all these little guys running after her and paying attention to her and being kind to her.
And doing what to her?
Being
Oh,
kind.
they were kind to her. That's how you recall the story.
And I love their
And
names.
what were they?
Grumpy and Sneezy, and those are the two I remember.
Who else was there? Who remembers? There was Dopey.
Sleepy, bashful.
Yeah.
Doc.
Bashful.
Doc.
Yeah.
Doc.
Doc.
So we all remember some of these, don't we? Interesting how these stay with us. So as you remember, Laura, what was the story really about, though? It was about this gal and all these little people. What were these little people doing?
What were the what?
All these
what,
little people that were with her. What were they doing?
They were very busy.
What were they busy doing?
I remember them being very busy doing. Were they taking care of the forest?
Okay.
Or were working? I remember the hi ho song.
It's off to work we go. See, what we'll see now with people of our age, we're going to start remembering the Walt Disney versions, which is fine. They were based on the same thing as the Brothers Grimm. Brothers Grimm have gotten over the centuries, eons and years. Matter of fact, fairy tales go back to, are you ready for this? The Bronze Age. They're very, very, very old. Folklore goes way, way, way back. So they always had something that they were trying to impart to people, generally to children, about some of the mores of the day. So what were these little people doing for Snow White? Do you remember? They were working and they were doing hi ho, it's off to work we go. What do you think the message was there? What was the message you got from that, Laura?
I guess that they were just kind to her. She was, for me, she was like lost, and they were taking care of her.
Okay, so she was kind of a lost soul.
I feel like she ran away from the castle.
Ah.
Somebody being mean to her.
Okay. And so they kind of came to the rescue.
So she ran away to the forest and found all these little people.
Interesting. I remember a lot of these story settings were around Germany or that area, and there were a lot of forests. So it made sense that these stories all took place in the forest. We don't see many forests where we live right now, most of us don't, but they were very much predominant in those years. So that would be kind of the main theme of that. So I think what we're all going to find is, as we talk about these fairy tales, these stories, that the Brothers Grimm were quite right, that we do find ourselves living out these stories. And we live them out over and over again, almost in a compulsive way, because we're trying to work something out in our own lives. So very interesting. Sally, what was your favorite fairy tale?
Well, I had two. One was Alice in Wonderland, the original, and one was called The Star Dipper.
Ah,
And along the lines of being kind to other people, the Star Dipper is all about that. This little girl, her mother is not feeling well. They live in the forest, and there's a well, but she has to walk quite a ways to get there. And her mother's thirsty, so she goes and she takes the pan, the dipper, and she goes to the well. And on her way back, she sees a thirsty dog, and so she gives him a drink. She sees another animal, she gives him a drink. She sees a woodcutter, he's very thirsty, she gives him a drink. And every time she gives somebody a drink, the dipper starts to glow and glow brighter and brighter. And by the time she gets home, she gives her mother a drink, and then the dipper becomes a star in the sky. And they are rewarded with her mother gets well. And it's, it's if you do kind things to others, kindness will come to you. And that's what I got from that story. It was one of my favorites. It's a very short little story, but it's very beautiful. And
was
it's out of
that pretty well summarized where you are in your life today?
yeah, pretty much. This is the book I was talking about, The Road.
Oh,
into
I love
Fairyland.
it. And look at how it's written. Like this,
Yeah.
Yeah,
not in a straight line.
like the winding road. Yeah.
Yes.
Every
It's a winding
story
road.
in there has a lesson, but very beautifully done. There's the story King Midas is in there, and there's the rabbit and the hare, or the tortoise and the hare. There's how the rabbit caught the sun. There's a whole bunch of wonderful stories in there. And there's another one that's very similar to what Francis was saying about being happy with what you have. And it's called the cap that mother made. She knits this beautiful cap for her son, and throughout his travels, people offer to buy it from him, ending with a king who offers him his crown and his kingdom. And he says, "No, I really want my cap that my mother made," because it meant something to him. It was made with love. And
Yeah,
all
I
these
think
other people just wanted to acquire it.
interesting, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
How does that affect you and your work you do today? Can you relate to that?
I think so. Being part of our ministry gives me an opportunity to officially, if you will, be kind to others and do what I can for them. And in my henna business, I'm doing something kind and very special for each of my clients. And I have witnessed it bringing happiness to people. So it makes me feel good too. So
That's amazing. Hi, Katrina. You arrived, huh? Hi.
you're back inside.
We were talking about fairy tales. We lost you again. Can you hear me, Katrina?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I've been struggling with my controls. My phone did something kind of weird. So I heard that you're talking about story tales. One of my favorite ones is The Ugly Duckling.
Ah.
The Hans Christian Andersen one. And I like that one because it shows, basically, treating someone differently because they're different, or treating them bad because they're different. Is just The Ugly Duckling was treated so horribly. It was a swan egg that fell into the clutch of duck eggs, and they just thought he was an ugly duck his whole life, and they treated him so horribly. But when he came into his own, he was this beautiful swan, and then everybody loved him. And but the moral for me is just really not to treat anyone differently because they look different, or they're just not like everyone else.
Yeah.
Because you never know what they'll turn into.
Isn't that the truth?
Mm.
How does that affect the work you do today with that kind of philosophy?
So where I am right now, I work with a lot of youth, and they're all really different. COVID has changed things a lot for us, but I have made connections with a lot of kids. first look, they seem off, really rough around the edges. But when you get to know them, they're the sweetest kids. Some of them do need a little bit of, correction as far as mannerisms and things like that, because they haven't had that at home. But at first look, you might write these kids off, but just getting to know them, they are awesome. I still get phone calls from them because we made that connection, but that is something that's helped me, not just with the kids, but with other people. You just never know. Like, give them a chance and you'll be really surprised.
Yeah, kind of a coming of age story. I think that's wonderful. Your kids would like to do the fairy tale thing too. They love this.
Yeah.
They love this. And you can really see who the people are in their stories and
Yes.
why the person chose that particular fairy tale. There's always a reason for it. They don't just drop out of the air. They're there for a very
I very much connected with that myself growing up. So it made a very big impression on me.
What did it tell you about yourself that you feel comfortable in sharing?
Well, I never quite fit in. I mean, I was literally the ugly duckling of my family.
Mhm.
I even had a family member call me that. Like, growing up, I never fit in. I didn't look like anyone. I didn't act like anyone. I was always like the weirdo, bringing every sick and hurt animal that I could find home to try and, heal them and help them. It
So
was
you could
different.
identify with the animals that were having difficulty.
Oh my gosh, like all the time. I did it so much. My grandma used to be like, don't bring another animal home. So I set up a hospital on the back porch. And so that's where, we kept them. I was just always the oddball, weird child. If it wasn't that, it was seeing and hearing other things. So that's something that has been all my life.
Interesting, isn't it?
Mhm.
We don't really think about this much in our conscious minds, but when we stop and reflect on it, we can see how these fairy tales and these early story identifications is how we saw ourselves at the time as a child. And the term they use in psychology is projection. We can literally project ourselves into that role because we so identify with it.
Mhm.
It makes sense to us. It's like, oh yeah, that feeling is familiar. It stays with us. There's something about the feeling of that fairy tale that's always with you when you have it. So I was asking about the book, and you were kind of showing us the book you had. But you can always remember the people that read you the fairy tales. Can you remember anybody reading to you, Katrina, when you were little?
Nope. As soon as I could read, that was all I did. I always surrounded myself with books. So that fairy tale was one I read myself. We had like the whole collection of Hans Christian Andersen fairy tales, and that book is long gone now. But I would spend hours reading everything from that, Alibaba, just all kinds of stuff. But that was my favorite one.
Well, the book is lost to history, but it lives through you.
Yes.
And you telling other people about that. And the way it shaped your life. The way that identification process helps shape your path. And we oftentimes don't think that these early childhood identification stories are shaping our lives. But if you look back, they definitely are. And they're very much with us today. Oh, it's Adriana. Yeah, we didn't talk about your fairy.
Actually, the Ugly Duckling was one of my favorites as well.
Okay,
along with The Little Mermaid and Princess and the Pea.
Okay, let's take both of those.
So I guess with Princess and the Pea was one of my parents both would read to me that and The Little Mermaid. And with the Princess and the Pea, it's a girl shows up to a castle and she needs a place to sleep, and the queen doesn't believe that she is the real princess and puts a little pea underneath all these giant pillows and everything. And the girl wakes up all sore from the pea hurting her, because I guess a princess has delicate skin and is delicate and can feel a bump in all the pillows and everything like that.
So the story is about sensitivity.
Mm-hmm.
Ring a bell in your head?
Oh yeah. Constantly reminded that I'm too sensitive.
Now that's so interesting. I also had that was my favorite fairy tale too. What was most commonly said about me about through my family was, "Oh, Bobby Lee, you're just too sensitive." And so I kept thinking, "Oh my God, I'm too sensitive." And then one day I realized, do I want to be insensitive?
No.
I mean, it's like, come on, that's not so bad. But the way it was said to me was obviously it was not a good thing to be. One doesn't aspire to be sensitive. So, how has your sensitivity directed your life, Adriana?
I mean, for me, I'm constantly told throughout my life, even to this day, that I'm too sensitive. But I feel that I feel for everyone. I feel all around. And even when I was little, I would apologize for running into the furniture or something like, oh, sorry. Like I always felt like everything had feelings, and I was always connected to those feelings. And and one thing that I try to build a shield up now is I feel other people's sensitivity or other people's feelings that affect me and my moods as well. And that's something I'm trying not to let my sensitivity thrive in, I guess you could say.
How does your sensitivity work for you?
For me, it makes me love. It makes me feel warm and happy when other people are feeling good as well. When I do, I just think feeling is a beautiful thing to do.
So, are you glad you're sensitive now?
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't want to be insensitive, but being around people who don't have empathy, it's hard for me. It's definitely an emotional roller coaster, but in a good way.
Well, see, I think a lot of us spend our lives trying to apologize and make it okay that we do what we do. It's almost like we're all saying, will you give me permission? Will you? Like we're all a bunch of parking tickets. Will you validate me? Will you validate me? Will you validate me? Rather than just saying, yeah, I'm a highly sensitive person. And
definitely.
make
And
that
I think
really okay with me.
That's something I'm finally like, what I was talking with one of my good friends about it, because we're both are very sensitive. I'm like, yeah, I'm sensitive. It's just who I am. I'm not going to change now. Like I'm a sensitive person.
And saying I'm not going to change now, but I think the bottom line is, do you want to change now?
No.
No, of course you don't. Because you're seeing the value of what it does in your life's work.
Exactly.
How it directly relates to your life's work.
Definitely. Definitely does.
So it's amazing how, yeah.
Cindy. Hi, everyone.
Oh, hi, Cindy. Did you hear
How are you?
Of what we're talking about?
Fairy tales, I do.
Yeah. You want to talk about your favorite fairy tale?
I don't know if there's enough time for that. I'm just kidding.
We can make time for you.
In a nutshell, I was thinking about that as I was listening, because I never thought, what does my life remind me? What fairy tale would my life remind me of? So as I'm sitting here thinking, I came up with The Wizard of Oz.
Oh,
and the reason for that is because that voice, I'm going to say the wizard, has always led me in my life, which is God. And I always listen to that inner voice. And that inner voice led me in my life and helped me to persevere an alcoholic, abusive mother, and helped me to find my purpose, which is a hospice worker. I love my job. I do the CERT team in town. I love that too. So I've been truly blessed by listening to God in my path in life. And so my fairy tale is a happy one. It's about perseverance. It's about certain things not defining who you are. And so my fairy tale is a happy one.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So it's amazing how you did not let that limit you. You saw it rather as a stepping stone to do something else with your life.
Absolutely. I always, as a little child, had this little way of me, which was this: I'll show you all one day. I'm going to be somebody, and I'm not going to be, my mother. And with that being said, God blessed me with forgiveness and 25 healthy years with a sober mom. So I learned a lot in my journey in life. which has helped me to help others, teach
So
them perseverance.
what's the
And
thing you're most, what are you most thankful for the fact that you had an alcoholic mother? What was
the ability, she gave me the gift of the ability of learning that addiction does not define who a person is, and that perseverance is real, and that you can persevere, and with the right, people and guidance, you can do anything with the help of God. And I'm a perfect example of that, because everybody in my family thought I would become a drug addict or an alcoholic. And I showed them all, didn't I? That little inner voice, I did show them all. And who would have ever thought? And on top of that, I'm a minister and a bishop in life. Come on. That's like a story. You couldn't even make that stuff up. So yeah, I'm very proud and blessed. I am. I'm in a good place. And I help people at the end of their lives prepare for going home to God. And that's a blessing to me. That's a real blessing. And I've been doing this work for 46 years. So
wow.
yeah,
Wow.
I love it.
So you owe mom a lot. You owe your mother a lot.
Oh yes, I learned a lot. Absolutely.
Her addiction taught you a great deal.
Yeah, she did, but I'm still learning, because now I have a son that drinks and he's like 23. So yeah, a lot of stuff has come up with that, but things are getting better with him, just trying to guide him down the right path, and got him into some weekly counseling, and he's doing it. So that I'm grateful for. He's at least now listening.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe you could talk to him sometime about the blessing there is in his having alcohol dependency, and what he can learn the lesson from, so he no longer feels the need to be dependent.
I have tried to talk with him, but when he drinks, he can also be very abusive with his mouth, if you will. And it's hard, because sometimes that, makes me think of things, because you can't help it. It brings you back to the time when you had to handle that kind of behavior. But with that being said, I have been praying like a hound, and asking my guides and my angels to please assist me with my son. And I believe it's happening before my eyes.
Yes.
He's met a nice girl, and she doesn't tolerate that behavior. He's going to weekly counseling. He's working a full-time job. So I'm trying to stay positive. But with that being said, I also have 3 clients that I work with, pretty regularly. So life is full, but it's all full in a good way. Because it's all good things. If you're doing good things to try to help others, amen, right?
Absolutely. And the joy of that, too, the hidden joy of that, is as we help others, we help ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Nice little payoff there for us. And there's nothing wrong with being rewarded for what you do. Unfortunately, sometimes a lot of us have kind of a warped sense of, I shouldn't receive any money or any value for what I'm doing, because I'm doing it for the love of God or whatever. Why can't you have both?
Mm-hmm.
Why can't?
Yeah.
Why limit what we can have? I mean, that
right.
doesn't make any sense. The only limitation we have is what we put on.
Right. This is true.
Do you remember a fairy tale, Paula?
I read them all the time to my grandkids.
I don't think she can hear me.
Paula, you're muted.
Okay. Yeah, I have a lot of them. I could identify with just about what everybody said, but I kind of like Hansel and Gretel, because I'm basically a problem solver, and that's what they did. They solved the problem of the witch. And I also got a big kick out of, I was brought up with adults are always right, and they proved that one was a no-go, because she wasn't right. They got rid of her. They outsmarted her, and I identify with that quite closely. And I've always done that. I've always outsmarted the authority figures and done things my way. So yeah, I'm definitely Hansel and Gretel.
That's good.
Paula, it's so good to hear your voice, my friend. I miss you.
Oh, thank you. It's good to have one. It's good to be here.
Yeah. Amen.
Okay, let's see what I can conjure up here. As we have come together in the joy of fulfilling our lives, we've got to witness the beauty of creation and how our life has been impacted by fairy tales and many other things. And now we are knowing that we are co-creators, that we can move out of what we've created into something new. We can be born again and again and again and again. So the divine mind that expresses its life in all of us, through all of us, is a living example of essential divinity. And that divine spirit, that spark, is in all creation. And it creates no divisions, no separations. And it heals all wounds. And so we acknowledge that healing power within life itself right now. And we bless all those people in the world that are suffering from any reason or any cause, mental or emotional. And we offer our prayers of love and light and power. And know that each of us, no matter how ill we seem to be, can find that spark of love, intelligence within ourselves that carries us through this life and through the next. So at this time, let us bring into our consciousness the people that are close to us that we would like to offer healing to. You can say their names and take yourself off mute.
Ann,
Mary,
Dale,
Jean,
Billy,
Kent,
Jerry,
Jeanette,
Joan,
Kelly,
Chris,
Shirley,
Sandy,
family.
Katie,
Bobby,
Mike,
Charlie. And as we share our love and our awareness to these people that we care about, that nurturing transcends any walls of separation. And we know that they receive our love because we've offered it in the purity of who we are. And for that, I say, thank you, God, and so it is. Amen.
So it is.
Amen.
thanks, Charlie. That was
That
beautiful.
was beautiful.
Very moving, Charlie.
Love your heart.
Thank you.